Hey listeners, last year was our 15th year of the best in food storytelling. As we head into 2025, we're kicking off a contest in collaboration with the podcast series Feast and Harmony and Sixth Man, where you have the opportunity to win a 4-night cruise for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, a food, wine, and spirits festival at sea. When you donate to HRN, you'll be entered for the chance to win a porthole cabin for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, sailing May 5th through 9th, 2025, from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico on Norwegian Gem. You'll also support another year of great food storytelling with a portion of your donation going toward disaster relief for the food and beverage communities within Western North Carolina and Southern California. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for culinary adventurers, featuring top celebrity chefs including Jonathan Waxman, Antonio Lafaso, Robert Irvine, and many, many more. There's a myriad of experiences such as restaurant takeovers, live food and mixology demos, themed parties, and more. To enter your chance to win, please visit heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or over to enter. That's heritageradionetwork.org/cruise.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. Wisconsin, the state of cheese, makes half of the nation's specialty cheese and wins more awards than any other state or country. Our heritage and traditions, master cheesemaker program, and the American propensity for innovation all put Wisconsin on the cutting wedge of cheesemaking. With over 600 varieties of cheese to choose from and 5,500 national and international awards and counting, get ready to turn your refrigerator into a trophy case. Enjoying a Wisconsin cheese is basically like winning a gold medal in culinary achievement. Set your mind at cheese. When you bite into a wedge of Wisconsin Wonderful, you know it is made with the ultimate skill and passion possible. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. We're doing a special show getting ready for New York City Beer Week. It's Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. And by the time the show comes out, it's going to be Beer Week, I'm sure. So I'm Jimmy Carboni. I'm the host of our 16th year with Beer Sessions Radio. And Heritage Radio Network is our great network. Support us, become a member at heritageradionetwork.org. So I'm going back with an OG of the New York City craft beer community, and I want you to meet Jeff, and Jeff brought a friend along, so that's the theme of the show today. So Jeff, you give us your quick intro, and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Lyons. I'm the owner and the brewer at Endless Life Brewing.
Great, and John?
Hey, I'm John. I'm the brewer owner for Stay Green Brewing Company.
Well, Jeff, I've been really wanted to talk to you for a while. You know, one of my favorite brewers. For some people, you're off the radar, but I want to just talk about you and a little bit about what you've done in the city. I remember when there was a brewery, Greenpoint, and it was you. I call it the Three Amigos. You, Chris, and Eric were all brewing, and It might have been back in 2016. Or I remember that I just had some of my favorite beers from you guys. Tell us about those days and, you know, what it was like, the camaraderie, the kind of beers you were making, because I feel like you really cut your teeth there.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my first full-time commercial gig in the industry, so it was great. We were, the three of us against the world. We were working like 80-hour, 90-hour weeks together, so yeah, it sort of forced camaraderie. And it was, three people who didn't have any real experience, a little bit here and there. So it was just three homebrewers trying to figure out how to, what the best process and procedures were, constantly recalibrating and checking in with each other and trying to just make the best beer we could and improve batch by batch. So yeah, all three of us were there for, I don't know, 2.5 years before we started to break up and go separate directions.
And then where did Chris and Eric, where did they go on to? You can just mention a brewery or two.
Sure. Eric went up to, he and his girlfriend moved up to Grand Rapids, Michigan. I believe he initially was at a place called Gray Matter. I think that's correct. And then Chris went to Gun Hill, which is actually where I am now. So Chris went to Gun Hill for a few years and then moved on. I'm not sure where he's at right now. And I've been at Gun Hill for, 3 years now, 4 years.
Yeah.
I guess about 4 years now.
Well, it's cool that we're talking in February because the end of February is New York City Beer Week, and I have a feeling that this is going to be a live show during that week. But then you were at Keg and Lantern, and some of the beers you made then, it's when I really started noticing you as a brewer. You want to tell me about some of the beers you made at Keg and Lantern?
Yeah, so when I left Greenpoint, I went over to Keg and Lantern, and I was the head brewer there, so we had a little bit more control over what we were doing. So we had grandfathered some mainstay beers, some full times that we had to keep up, but other than that, we were able to make whatever we wanted. So when I started, Brett Taylor was there with me, so he's one of the owners and the brewer at Wild East now. But we were having a lot of fun, trying to teach each other how to make better lagers. And, I was able to bring in some saisons, bring in some barrels and start doing some sour beers over there. So it's sort of, that was where I was able to really start to express myself and, explore the things that really interested me, sort of lay the groundwork for where we're at now with Endless Life. It's a lot of lagers, saisons, and sour beers.
Well, you also had just you had some beers that personally in my life, I literally my old bar Jimmy's Number 43. The day it closed, the last beer I had was one of your Keg and Lantern beers, and I can't remember what it was. It might have been a Kolsch, it might have been a lager. It was probably August of 2017. I know this is really weird and random, but this is a New York City Beer Week episode, so I think it's important to reflect on the careers of some of our brewers, because at this point, a lot of you guys have been brewing for 10 years, so. But you don't remember that beer, do you?
Yeah, that's about right.
One day I'll remember. But
I remember
the
making a
last beer I
Kolsch.
had at a legendary beer bar. It was probably the Kolsch. It was Keg and Lantern Kolsch.
I didn't know that.
And I remember we poured 3. Before we gave back the keys, we basically poured 3 of them, me and 2 friends. We downed the beers, and that was the end of that pub after 11 years. So pretty cool story, but it was your beer, and
I can't believe.
it's probably still remember those beers that you made then,
Yeah, I was really happy with the Kolsch we were making at Keg and Lantern. I'd never heard that story. That's a good one.
Well, let me bring in John to get a little more color, and we'll keep talking. We'll work our way up through your career. So, John, tell us more about you. So, I just met you today off the street, but that's what the New York City Beer Week vibe is like.
Yeah, for sure. As I mentioned earlier, like Jeff and I kind of met when I was working as his mobile canner. I kind of I came from home brewing into commercial brewing by working for Fire Island Beer Company years ago, and segued into mobile canning. I saw it as an opportunity to kind of get in front of a lot of different great minds in the beer industry and kind of cut my teeth a little bit. And that's kind of how I got to know Jeff. And now I'm running my own mobile canning company called Can It. And I also am running Stay Green Brewing Company, which it has been growing at like a really nice pace. A lot of my beers are cream ale focused. And usually I'm trying to take like a different approach to popular styles. So like What Coast IPA, which is like my current flagship IPA, is a New England IPA that I kind of showcase a little bit of like West Coast hop flavor in, just to make everyone scratch their head a little bit. Because, that's what I love about beer. I love, when you taste a beer and you kind of have to stop for a second and think about, what's going on.
It's great, man. I know Jeff invited you on. So, Jeff, back to you, man. That Kolsch from Keg and Lantern. So that really was, if you want to know beer stories, yeah, it really was the last beer poured at Jimmy's Number 43 in 2017. And I don't think I ever told you because usually there was a lot more going on then. But it was my choice. That was the beer I wanted that day. It was also a great beer in the daytime. But I'm trying to give some props to you, and I think John will agree with me. You've made some of my favorite beers in New York City.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's one year with Endless Life you had a Mexican lager, and I think you might have had a Kolsch, but that Keg and Lantern Kolsch was pretty special. What was the character of that beer? Because it was very subtle. It was subtle but delicious, and it didn't hammer you in any way. You know, it wasn't hoppy, it wasn't bitter, it wasn't too malty. Do you remember that Kolsch that you made?
Yeah, absolutely. We called it selection bias. It took me a few minutes while we were talking for the name to come back to me. But yeah, we called it selection bias. There was German hops called Select that we used in that. I'd never played with them before that beer, but it came out really well the first time. We just kind of kept tweaking it. But yeah, just trying to find a balance, let the yeast express itself a little bit, and yeah, find a balance between a little bit of maltiness, a little bit of breadiness, and yeah, just a really nice, like noble-esque hop character. I was really happy with that beer. That
Yeah,
was a
no,
good one.
I remember it was the kind of beer I wanted to drink in like a wine goblet. Just looking at the color was subtle and light, but a lot of just nuanced flavors. John, you've worked a little bit with Jeff. Is there anything you want to say about his brewing style? Maybe one or two of the beers that you really like that he's made. This is the Lyons show. We freaking love your beers, Jeff.
We do love Jeff's beers. I mean, honestly, you mentioned that Mexican lager, and I can remember the first time he had me try that Mexican lager that he's doing with Endless Life, and it really struck me because he really showcased the corn flavor that you can pull in Mexican lager without having any off flavors at all. And it was really just a pretty incredible beer. And obviously like Jeff's talent for mixed fermentation beer, because it really is some of the best mixed ferm beer I've had. A lot of the beers that I've had with Jeff.
Well, I think one thing I've decided on for this year, and it's why I wanted to talk about the Kolsch and Mexican lagers, I really feel like this year is about classic styles. And I feel like, using subtleties, I think it's really the beers that I want to drink and that people want to drink. I don't think we have to get too weird anymore. Jeff, what's your take on classic styles and some things you might be making now?
Absolutely love them. I think that's one of the things that, myself and a few of my best friends in the beer industry, I think that the reason that we sort of cling to each other is just that love of classic styles. I mean, there's room for everything. And if you're making the wildest, craziest, hoppiest IPA or adding the craziest ingredients to some kind of stout or something else, there's room for all of that. But I think there's a beauty, to just beer flavored beer. And I think that's one of the reasons that John and I kind of hit it off, is just loving subtlety, some restraint, and just making things that are interesting enough that if you have a session and you have 3, 4, 5 of them in a row, there's enough happening that you can, if you pay attention to it, it'll keep your interest, and you're constantly finding new little shades to it. But if you're just sitting there having a good time with friends, you don't have to think about it. Just really good, it can go without any thought. Just easy drinking, good, well-made beers.
Yeah. So why'd you bring John on the show today?
He's a fantastic guy, an incredible brewer. And yeah, we started working together, and we're kind of coming full circle. In a couple of days, by the time you hear this, we'll have started working together again. And
Well,
I think what Jeff was about to tell you was just that, we're coming full circle with the fact that, I canned for him when he was the head brewer at Keg and Lantern. And we've come all the way around to me canning for him for Endless Life, which is a pretty awesome, story to tell. That he's gone from head brewer to owning his own beer brand, and I'm going to be packaging it for him, which is really exciting. One of the best things about working with Jeff is, he made this comment to me once that he always learned something new when we worked together. And like, I felt the same sentiment. And that's why we like really loved working together for all these years and always talking, we always continued talking.
So you canned a lot of beers. With someone like Jeff, what kind of feedback are you giving?
About quality assurance and how to make sure that the beer is going to taste the same way it does out of the tank in the package. I mean, like that's the most important part for me. I'm the last hands to touch a lot of these brewers' beers. So I want it to taste just like it tastes when I'm putting it into the can. I want it to be a fair representation of what they're trying to make. I mean, on my end, Jeff just opened my eyes to a lot of styles that like maybe I didn't give a fair shake, or that I haven't even like put on my radar. Like you talked about a Kolsch. Like I love Kolsch's, but like you're right, there's like a lot of like subtlety and nuance to his Kolsch, and like Jeff would classify a lot of his lagers and his Kolsch's as like rustic, like a rustic Kolsch. You know what I mean? Which I never heard anyone like refer to anything that way, but it just had some more subtlety, some more flavors that I didn't pick up on in other people's beer, which was really exciting.
We're on a new online recording system, and Jeff dropped out, but he just came back. So Jeff, I was just talking with Jon about your great Kolsch from Keg and Lantern days, and we were trying to figure out what made it so special to me. I always think it's about the brewer more than anything, because usually if someone says, I'll get a Kolsch or I'll get any style, I'll get a hazy, it doesn't really appeal to me unless I know who made it. How would you characterize that Kolsch that you made then? And, and are you still making a version of it? I think Jon said it might have been rustic. I thought it as just subtle and really delicious.
I love all sort of lagers and easygoing styles and classic styles. I certainly love Kolsch. That's probably the style that has changed the most when I've brewed it at different places. So when we started making a beer at Keg and Lantern, we were using German select hops, so we called it selection bias, and it was sort of just like straight ahead, sort of the perfect ideal Kolsch for me. And then when we started at Endless Life, we had to use, well, we use all New York ingredients, 100% New York malt and hops. And so we couldn't continue to use, the German hops and the German malt. So we kind of had to do our own take on it, when we started making, Construed to Waste Your Time, the Kolsch that, we opened up with at Endless Life. So, I think that's probably what Jon was talking about. It was definitely much more of a rustic style, a little less like clean and buttoned up, and a little bit more like farmhouse style. A little bit more malt and some wheat going on, a little bit phenolics from the yeast character. Um, so yeah, and then we've kind of pulled it back to I've switched up the hops more recently, and it's a little bit in between the two. It's a little bit closer to what we were doing when we were at Keg and Lantern, doing a little bit more of a straight ahead Kolsch, and just letting it be nice and clean and easy, a little bit less rustic.
Yeah. And Jon was talking about how he got to know you by canning your beers since way back then. How important is that the relationship with the canner? Because I can see that it'd be easy to screw up a good beer with a bad canning.
Absolutely crucial. Yeah, that's why once I met Jon and we started working together, that's 100%. It's wherever he goes, that's where we're going. So I'm excited to start getting some beer into cans with him again. He's fantastic. It's I think
Yeah.
that's the truth with anything though. I think you can have a fantastic beer, and if the person that's putting it into kegs or into cans or bottles, whatever the final package is, you can ruin a completely, good or perfect beer with one misstep when you go to final packaging. So it's absolutely crucial. So a lot of trust there.
Yeah. Well, what's cool is that, like, it's I don't know, this is 2025, and really the New York City, the current craft beer scene is barely 11 years old, to me, since the big craft beer laws in 2014. And the little things like you kind of working your way up to your own brand, and we're going to talk about where you're brewing now, and guys like Jon who are, in this support role as canning, and now he's got a label. To me, these are the great stories. But you look at legendary beer regions. You got Belgium, Germany. There's hundreds of years of history with some breweries. So I feel like we're only just getting started. But I really like the direction that you're going in, Jeff. And for you, Jon, too. I mean, you really had a great window into the scene by canning and getting to know so many of these brewers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been kind of the motivation behind getting involved in canning. I kind of get to be in a lot of my favorite brewers' cellars. I get to see their best practices and learn a lot of, what I think is valuable and a lot of what not to do as well. And it's, I obviously had my own intentions with what I wanted to do with my brand. I homebrewed for 13 years before I entered the industry. I thought there was this like point of entry that I couldn't surpass for some reason or another. It's been a great way to learn about beer for sure.
Well, let's talk about what's changed. Let's say 10 years. 10 years ago, equipment versus now, services like support, cleaning, canning, and New York State ingredients. I mean, we know things have changed a lot in 10 years. Why don't you each point out the areas that you work in that you've seen a huge change in 10 years, which is only just part of, it's like the building blocks of good beer, right? So what about you, Jeff? What's changed a lot in 10 years? I mean, you want to talk about ingredients?
Yeah.
I mean, remember 10 years ago, were you using New York State hops and malt then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything's changed. It's incredible how different this industry is, and in every way. But yeah, if we're just gonna to speak to the ingredients at this moment, I mean, the quality of the malt and the hops in New York State has just sort of gone through the roof of where it used to be. It's incredible. Um, I worked at a homebrew shop prior to working at Greenpoint Beer and Ale, and one of the things we did when we were there is Ted Hawley opened up New York Craft Malt during that time, and we started bringing some of that into the homebrew shop. So I started brewing with that at home, and through the Brooklyn Bruisers Homebrew Club up in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Um, Chris Prout, who was one of the brewers I worked at Greenpoint Beer now with, he prior to New York Craft Malt opening, the only way you could get anything that was New York malt was you'd have a farmer in New York grow grain, and then Andrea Stanley at Valley Malt would malt it, and Chris would take his old blue beat up pickup truck and fill up the bed of it with Valley Malt and bring it back, and all of us homebrewers and the bruisers would split it up. So there were a lot of us that were using the very first iterations of New York grains. Um, but now there's a half dozen maltsters. I still use probably 99.9% of the grain that I use is still with Ted Hawley at New York Craft Malt. Um, he's become a really good friend over the years. I remember doing a show with you, Jimmy, with Ted and a few others a few years ago. But the quality and the consistency has just become phenomenal, really. I actually prefer it at this point to using any, continental malts. Getting pallets of malt over from Europe or anything like that. Um, but also, the whole reason that I was really drawn to this industry was, beer's fantastic. It's a lot of fun, but if you don't have the community, what are we doing? And, to be able to grow relationships over the past handful of years, like we've been able to do with Jon, or going back, like 10 years with Ted, it's fantastic. You can pick up the phone and call or text him and, hit him with ideas and pester him to make different kinds of malts for you, to change things. And, we have the opportunity because these aren't just sort of commodity malts and they don't all taste, this hasn't been an industry that's been going for hundreds of years. It's still evolving, and we're able to explore flavors that, if you're just sort of flipping through a catalog and ordering that way and never knowing the people who are growing and processing your ingredients, um, you don't get to have that kind of influence on what's happening. We get to play with all these flavors and sort of create beers that have never tasted this way before because of the ingredients that we're able to use. So I actually really enjoy using all the New York ingredients, both for the community and the relationships, but also to be able to explore some of those flavors.
Yeah, that's great. Great, Jeff. All right. And John, for you, the same. Like I said, you kind of got to know everyone by canning. Just think about 10 years and, what's changed, what's improved.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I've watched over the like evolution of my career in the commercial beer industry is just it's finally come full circle back to lagers. I feel like everyone kind of didn't want to touch making clean beer for a long time. There's a lot of kind of a monotony, especially on the canning side of things, where I would see every brewery packaging a New England IPA and a sour beer and probably a stout and very rarely a lager. There was like a handful of breweries, people like Jeff, people like John Keelty over at Big Alice back in the day were like some of the few people that were really still making clean beer. So I'm like really excited to see a resurgence of clean beer because, I got into craft beer pretty early on. My dad's from England, so I was constantly being told that we didn't have a great selection in America as a kid. And, trying different English beers that he would get over here. So seeing some of these classic styles come back is just awesome. The first canning run I did for Wild Yeast, Brett Taylor did a Czech Pilsner and an English Dark Mild, which, me and my whole crew kind of looked at him like, are you sure about this? Because it seemed like a crazy proposition to not put out an IPA on your first round. And he did really well with them. It's just like really exciting to see these classic styles come back.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it's one thing I love about Jeff Lyons is that he has worked with so many. He's very modest, but he's worked with some really great brewers, and that's how I know Brett also from Wild Yeast was from when he worked with Jeff. Let's get some of the adventures of canning, and how that's evolved. Because I remember being at Threes about 10 years ago, and it was canning day. So they had this mobile unit come in. They cleared out all the tables, and I got there right at the end, and they had to like hose everything down, and then they put back all the tables and chairs, and it was a tap room. Is it still like that? What's the setup like that you're going around with?
So, I mean, the setup that I'm going around with is kind of catered to New York City and the tri-state area. So we have a really nimble canning line. It's a 3-head filler. It does about 30 cans a minute, which is pretty fast. So, I mean, part of the way that I set it up is for it to be pretty compact because we work with everyone from, large scale breweries like Keg and Lantern, or I guess
it's still pretty
small. But to really small areas like the original Strong Rope tasting room that was, a pretty small space to fit into with a mobile canning unit, and we had to figure out a way to do that. So
you show up and you literally bring this machinery into the brewery.
Yeah, so we show up with a box truck. We show up with a labeling machine, a canning machine, a way to feed the cans into the canning line. And then we have some quality assurance products like a dissolved oxygen meter that we use to check to make sure that we're not oxidizing the beer. Because, I mean, that's like the number one enemy to canned beer or any packaged beer. Like too much oxygen. If you ever see, I don't know, a yellow beer that's turned brown or a beer that should be crisp and clean and taste like paper instead, that's probably because it oxidized and whoever put it in that can didn't do the right thing.
So you mean yellow turns to brown, you flush it down?
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's a drain pour if I ever heard one. Yeah.
But wait, so do you need like a forklift and you take this whole thing off the truck?
We have a lift gate on the back of my truck. So, because I've been doing this for a while, I was really able to carefully select the equipment that we have. So yeah, we have a lift gate that's large enough to fit the canning line on, to fit the labeler and all the other equipment that we need. We basically come in and set up like we exist in the brewery. I think, the reason I'm so close with a number of brewers, but, especially Jeff, is because we were packaging on a weekly basis at one point, and I was like an extension of his production team. I kind of just became part of the Keg and Lantern team for those couple of years.
No, that's great. Well, what was it like in the pandemic? I know that it seemed like suddenly everyone had to can.
What
were you doing then? Where were you working?
I was working with Keg and Lantern at that time. I was working out at Killsborough on Staten Island. They were still in their original space, and there was a lot of driving back and forth to there. Wild East, Big Alice, Iconic. A lot of city breweries. We were really booming in the city, and it was scary. Obviously, being the pandemic was happening. Being out on the streets and like loading canning equipment in and all that. But there was kind of a nice side to it, which is we could get around the city so quickly. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, no traffic. But how did you ensure your quality? Because I felt like suddenly everyone was canning, and that I did get some cans that, not from you, but people would send me cans in the mail, and sometimes I wondered, would these cans last even more than 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the way that we really ensured quality is checking the dissolved oxygen in the tank, making sure that everything was kept really sanitized and clean, and checking the dissolved oxygen in the can, very often, just to make sure that we're not picking up a lot of oxygen and ruining the beer.
Yeah. And then I'm not throwing in politics, but when you talk about cans, what are they made of? They're aluminum.
Yeah, they're aluminum.
And where do you get them? And do you have to order out? Do you have to contract out a certain amount? I don't really understand how that works.
So, I mean, luckily, I work with a supplier called Lindermeyer Monroe, and they kind of insulated us during the pandemic. So there was a can shortage, and it was really tough for a lot of people. But the customers that had been working with me, they kind of set aside an allotment. I also had some foresight, so I kind of knew something was happening. The suppliers weren't really telling me what was going on, but I had a warehouse at the time, so I just started ordering excess cans and storing them so we could get through this whole situation.
What's the name of your canning company?
It's called Can It. Can It Mobile Services. I'm wearing the shirt right now. This is.
I can't see because I'm on the radio, bro.
Yeah, I know.
I can't see.
I know. But it's cool to wear your own shirt. There's a good feeling about that. But yeah, man, this is actually a new venture. So like, I worked for another mobile canning company, and just about a little less than a year ago, me and one of the other lead operators that I worked with decided, it's time for us to do this for our own, because I think we have like a certain attention to detail that it's a step above everyone else, and we wanted to offer like, top line service for everybody.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. That's what I was trying to get at. It's amazing, all the different services and support that you need to make good beer. For me as a former bar owner, I remember just the evolution of draft systems and the evolution of the guys that cleaned, and women, the people that were the cleaning services of draft line.
Yeah,
sounds like
totally.
you're in the same boat, because I remember that there were many years ago, most small breweries only had draft, and you couldn't just can unless you had a big canning operation.
Yeah, canning lines are expensive. I mean, canning equipment's expensive. That's kind of what it's all about. Like we kind of outsource that service. I mean, not only is like the canning process expensive, the equipment needed, but also then you have to hire a full-time canning operator, really, because it is a full-time job. You have to know kind of the nuances of how to maintain the line, how to make sure that your fills are good, and how to make sure that, the beer is going to taste the way that it should.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Jeff's place now. So, Endless Life, I'll update everyone. I mean, I think, just so you know, listeners, Jeff is just offline right now. But I know that there was a small brew set up at the Gun Hill Public in Industry City a couple years ago. And Jeff was brewing some of his beers there, as well as some for Gun House Public and maybe some others. But, if Jeff's making it was good beer. And then just in the last, 6 or 7 months, an opportunity arose, and Gun Hill Public was able to move downstairs to what had been what was it? It was the barrel room for
Big Alice, actually.
For Big Alice barrel room in Industry City, it's changed everything. The bar's busy. It opens out for Gun Hill Public, it opens out onto a courtyard. And I walked in one day and there was Jeff with his equipment. So what's it like when you went in with the can? Do you can there at Industry City with them?
We're just starting, actually. This Friday will be our first canning run at Industry City to can Endless Life beer. So it's pretty exciting.
Wow. Have you scouted it out already?
I've been in the space, not since Jeff's been producing his beer there, but I've been in that space before. And yeah, I mean, it's a great space.
So how are you going to get your canning equipment into that space? Because I know this is probably the issue with a lot of small breweries.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I have everything on wheels. The way Industry City is set up, there are like 3 stages of loading docks along one side of the building. So we're gonna have to roll it up this long ramp and get it in there and set up. It's just part of the gig, And
how long will you be there?
I think we're going to be doing about 120 cases. So that's 6 4-packs per case. Probably start to finish 6 to 8 hours, something like that.
Wow, that's an event.
Yeah.
We'll check that out. And do you know ahead which beers that Jeff will be canning?
I know that he's doing some mixed fermentation canning and he's doing some clean canning. And the way that we do that, we have a clean set of fill heads and lines, and we have a mixed fermentation set of fill heads and lines. And we always do the clean beer first and then the mixed fermentation second. And then I have a standard operating procedure to really clean and sterilize all the surfaces of the canning line afterwards.
Well, John, it was great talking to you about canning, and I'm still into this. It's 2025. It's New York City Beer Week. Thinking of the evolution in New York City. And one thing is patience, because I think that, craft breweries in America, craft breweries in New York exploded so fast. But there's a lot of things that take time to build, and some of them is just not just the talent of the brewers, it's equipment available, it's consumers, and the culture, of drinking. And I just think that there's a lot of great beers being made in New York City, and I still like to drink them. In fact, recently I was at Eckhart Beer, which hasn't even opened yet, but they're canning beers, and they're going to be out in Bushwick, and they're focusing on German style beers. Listen, I'm going to probably close this out, but I wanted to ask you, tell me, for New York City Beer Week coming up, one brewery that you'd go to, not your own, and what beer you'd drink.
I'd probably say Wild East. Outside of them, my friend Ricky, who has a new beer project called Mad Love Beer, I'd like to try his lager. That's Low Life Lager. It's just something I want to get in front of.
Where's that brewery?
So he's doing similar to what Jeff and I are doing, which is alternating proprietorship, and he's doing that out of Flagship out on Staten Island.
Oh, that's great. And just tell everybody what you're doing, what Stay Green Brewing is.
I'm doing Stay Green Brewing Company. I am doing an alternating proprietorship out of Destination Unknown Beer Company out on Long Island in Bayshore. A lot of my beer is very cream ale focused. So the reason I fell in love with that style is because it's the only intrinsically American style, and it was invented in New York. It's very lager-like, unlike what the name insinuates. It's not creamy at all. It's light. It's easy drinking. Usually incorporates flaked rice and flaked corn. And yeah, kind of adjacent to Kolsch, like we were talking about earlier.
That's great. And then last question, I want you to answer it, and then we'll close out. Tell our listeners, what is beer-flavored beer? Because I think the title of the show is going to be beer-flavored beer for New York City Beer Week.
Yeah, to me, it's showcasing subtlety. It's really like getting people to sit down and taste the beer and have to really think about the malt and the hops and tasting the terroir that is inside the beer. I think what I love about beer is those subtle flavors. Mind Gold, my flagship beer, I tried to draw a lemon flavor out of hops that a lot of people don't taste, and that's what excites me about beer.
Well, that's great, man. You guys, Jeff and John, thanks for joining me here. We got a new online program, and I'll also be out in the field a lot. So Beer Sessions Radio and Heritage Radio kicking along, 16th year. Expect a lot of new things in 2025. And big shout out to our new engineer, George. Thanks so much for joining me here. We'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right.
Thanks
so
Jimmy.
much.